I was 6 years old the first time I realized I didn't belong in my own family. I don't mean that in the dramatic, every kid thinks they're adopted way. I mean, I knew that if my parents could erase me from existence, they would. Maybe they didn't say it outright, but I felt it in the little things. Like how my dad's face hardened whenever he looked at me, or how my mom's voice got clipped and irritated when she had to say my name. How my older sister, Brianna, got hugs, praise, and love, while I got sighs, cold shoulders, and the bare minimum. At first, I thought I could change it. That if I were good enough, quiet enough, smart enough, they would love me the way they loved Brianna. How wrong I was. The start of my invisible years. My sister and I were only 2 years apart, but we might as well have lived in different worlds. Brianna was the golden child, beautiful, popular, and everything my parents wanted in a daughter. She was a straight A student, a cheerleader, and the kind of girl who made adults gush about how mature and well-raised she was. And me, I was the inconvenience. I wasn't as pretty. My hair wasn't as smooth, my smile not as dazzling. I was quiet, always lost in books, always trying to please people who didn't care. When Brianna had her first dance recital, my parents spent weeks helping her practice, buying her the best costumes, recording every second of her performance. When I had my first spelling bee, Mom dropped me off and left before it even started. By the time I was 10, I had stopped expecting things. No birthday parties. No how was your day. No bedtime stories or hugs. I just existed. There was one moment that changed everything for me. The moment I stopped hoping, stopped dreaming, and started planning my escape. I was 13. Brianna was 15 and had just been accepted into some prestigious summer leadership program. My parents were ecstatic, took her out to dinner, bought her new clothes, showered her with praise. I had just won first place in a statewide writing competition. First place. Out of hundreds of kids. My teacher was so proud she called my parents to tell them. You know what my mom said? Oh, that's nice. Then she hung up. That night at dinner, they toasted to Brianna. My dad actually stood up, raised his glass, and gave a speech about how proud he was of her. I sat there, staring at my untouched plate, feeling something inside me die. I realized in that moment, they were never going to love me. No matter what I did, I would never be enough for them. So why was I still trying? I made a decision that night. If they weren't going to care about me, fine. But one day, I was going to make them regret it. I didn't want revenge in the traditional sense. I didn't want to scream at them, beg for love, or even hurt them. I wanted justice. I wanted to prove that they had underestimated me, discarded me like I was nothing, only to watch me rise higher than they ever imagined. I wanted to become someone so undeniably successful, so powerful, that they would be forced to see me. And then, I would turn my back on them, just like they did to me. After that night, the night I realized my family would never love me, I stopped trying. No more forcing conversations that died the second I spoke. No more chasing approval that would never come. No more waiting for someone to notice me. Instead, I did what I had to do to survive. I became a ghost in my own house. I woke up earlier than everyone else so I wouldn't have to see them in the mornings. I ate dinner quickly and quietly, clearing my plate before anyone could comment on how I was too quiet or too moody. I spent most of my time locked in my room, pretending I wasn't there. And they didn't care. I tested it once. One Friday night, I stayed out past curfew, just walked around the neighborhood, sat in the park, and waited. No one called. No one texted. When I got home, my mom was watching TV, my dad was on his laptop, and Brianna was scrolling on her phone. Not a single one of them even looked up. I could have disappeared off the face of the earth, and they wouldn't have noticed. I knew I couldn't live like that forever. I had two choices: let their neglect destroy me or use it to fuel me. I chose the second option. At school, I threw myself into academics, not because I wanted their approval, but because I saw it as my ticket out. Straight A's, honor roll, advanced placement classes. I needed a full scholarship because there was no way in hell my parents would pay for my college. I got a part-time job at a bookstore when I was 15. My parents barely noticed. My dad grunted something about, "Good, now you won't ask for money," and went back to whatever he was doing. Perfect. Because while they were busy ignoring me, I was saving every penny. By 16, I had a bank account my parents didn't know about. By 17, I had mapped out exactly what I needed to do to leave and never look back. Brianna, of course, continued to shine. At 16, she got her first car, a brand new one, fully paid for by my parents. When I asked if I could at least get driving lessons, my mom waved me off. "You can use Brianna's old bike." She said it with a straight face. At 17, Brianna got accepted into her dream school, a prestigious private university. My parents cried when she opened her acceptance letter. Me. I had already applied to colleges, on my own, without their help, without their advice. I had my heart set on one school, New York University. I didn't tell anyone when I sent in my application. I didn't tell anyone when I got the email saying I was accepted, with a full ride. And when the acceptance letter came in the mail, I opened it in my room, alone, and smiled. I was finally getting out. Brianna's graduation party was a huge event, caterers, decorations, family flying in from out of town. She stood in the center of the room, glowing, basking in the attention, while I sat quietly in the corner, sipping on soda and counting down the minutes until I could leave. That's when my aunt, one of the few relatives who actually acknowledged my existence, turned to me and asked, "So, Naomi, where are you going for college?" Before I could answer, my mom let out a laugh. Like an actual, full-blown laugh. "Oh, Naomi's not going anywhere far," she said dismissively. "She's just going to community college." Silence. I felt every single eye in the room turn to me. My hands clenched around my cup. I could have stayed quiet, let them believe what they wanted. But I was done being invisible. So I set my drink down, stood up, and said, "Actually, I got a full scholarship to NYU." The room went dead silent. Brianna's smile faltered. My dad's face darkened. My mom blinked, like she hadn't heard me right. "What?" she said. I tilted my head. "NYU. Full ride. I moved to New York in August." The tension was so thick I could choke on it. My parents looked stunned, like they couldn't comprehend the fact that I had done something big, without them. And Brianna, for the first time in my life, I saw jealousy in her eyes. That night, my parents didn't congratulate me. Didn't ask about my plans, my major, my future. They just ignored it. Like they always did. But this time, I didn't care. Because I knew something they didn't. I was leaving. And one day, they were going to regret every second they spent ignoring me. The day I left for New York, my parents didn't even bother to drop me off at the airport. My dad handed me a stiff envelope with exactly $100 inside, like that was supposed to mean something after 18 years of neglect. My mom barely looked up from her phone when I walked out the door. Brianna was too busy packing for her own move to care. And that was it. No tearful goodbyes. No last-minute hugs. Just me, my suitcase, and a one-way ticket to a life they never thought I could have. Moving to New York was a shock to my system. For the first time in my life, I was completely alone. No family. No safety net. Just me in a tiny dorm room that felt more like home than my parents' house ever did. I didn't have extra money to waste on coffee or eating out like my classmates. My scholarship covered tuition, but I had to work 2 part-time jobs to pay for everything else. Mornings were for classes. Afternoons and nights were for working. Weekends, spent in the library, grinding to keep my grades up. It was exhausting. It was brutal. But it was mine. For the first time, every single thing I had, I earned. For a while, I didn't hear from my family at all. No texts. No calls. Nothing. Until Thanksgiving. I wasn't planning to go home. I had picked up extra shifts at work and was perfectly fine spending the holiday alone. But then my phone rang. It was my mom. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the best of me. "Hello." A beat of silence. Then, "Why didn't you tell us you weren't coming home for Thanksgiving?" I laughed. Actually laughed. "Didn't think you'd care." She sighed, like I was being difficult. "Well, Brianna is bringing her boyfriend home, and your dad thought it would be nice if the whole family was together." Translation. Brianna wanted to show off, and they needed me to play the role of the less successful, invisible younger sister. I almost said yes, because a part of me still wanted to believe they cared. But then I remembered every forgotten birthday. Every time they looked through me like I wasn't there. Every time they made it clear Brianna was their only priority. So I smiled, even though she couldn't see me. "Yeah, I'll pass." And for the first time in my life, I hung up first. By the time I was 21, I had built something for myself. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. I had an internship at a major media company, top grades, and a growing network of people who actually saw me. I was no longer the girl sitting in the corner, hoping to be noticed. And then, the phone calls started. Not just from my mom, but from Brianna. "Hey, Naomi, how's New York? We should catch up. Mom and Dad were just talking about you the other day." They were trying. Now. Not when I was struggling. Not when I was scraping by, working myself to exhaustion. But now that I had something they could be proud of. Now that I wasn't just the forgotten one. I ignored most of their calls, but one night, Brianna left a voicemail that caught my attention. "Hey, Naomi, Mom and Dad are having some money problems. Things are a little tight, and I was thinking, since you're doing so well, you might be able to help out." I sat there, staring at my phone, stunned. After everything, they ignored me for years, and now, suddenly, I was supposed to be their safety net. I should have been angry. Should have felt satisfaction. But all I felt was, nothing. Because this was exactly what I had been waiting for. I called my mom first. She picked up on the second ring, her voice unusually soft. Naomi, honey, it's been so long. I didn't give her time to pretend she cared. Brianna said you guys were having money issues. A small pause. Then a carefully controlled, we're fine. It's just, things are a little difficult right now. I could already picture her sitting at the kitchen table, looking for the right words to manipulate me into feeling obligated. I leaned back in my chair, smiling to myself. Well, Mom, I'm sure you'll figure it out. Silence. Then, what? You'll figure it out, I repeated. I mean, it's not like you ever helped me when I was struggling, right? A sharp inhale. That's not fair. I laughed under my breath. No, you're right. Fair would have been treating me like I existed. But we both know that never happened. She started to stutter something, but I wasn't interested. I gotta go, I said lightly. Good luck with everything. And then, I hung up. I always thought justice would feel like revenge. Like throwing their neglect back in their faces, making them suffer the way they made me suffer. But it didn't. Justice, I realized, wasn't about making them hurt. It was about making sure they had no power over me. They ignored me my whole life. Acted like I was invisible. And now, I was the one who walked away. And the best part, I didn't even look back. By the time I turned 25, I had everything they told me I'd never have. I was working as a senior producer at a top media company, earning more money than I ever thought possible. I had my own apartment in Manhattan, expensive furniture that I paid for in cash, and a circle of people who actually cared about me. I built this life from nothing. No help, no support, just pure determination and the knowledge that no one was coming to save me. And yet, I wasn't done. Because while I had moved on, my family, they were falling apart. I didn't keep tabs on them, at least, not directly. But when you stop chasing after people, sometimes they start chasing you. The first time I saw my mom's name pop up on my phone after years of silence, I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the best of me. Naomi, she said, voice tight, we need to talk. I sighed, already bored. About what? She hesitated. Then, it's Brianna. Of course, it was. Brianna's life was not the picture-perfect success story they expected. After college, she married a guy from a wealthy family, exactly what my parents wanted. But what they didn't see coming was the divorce. A messy, expensive divorce that left Brianna drowning in legal fees. And my parents, they were broke. The same parents who told me to figure it out when I needed help. The same ones who never even asked about my struggles. Now, suddenly, they needed me. And they hated that. A week later, I got another call. This time, it was my dad. My father, who barely acknowledged my existence my entire childhood, was now on the phone with me, his voice stiff, like every word hurt to say. Naomi, he said, forcing a deep breath. We need a favor. I leaned back in my leather office chair, staring out my window at the city skyline. A favor. We just need a little help, he admitted. Financially. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I let the silence stretch, let the weight of what he was asking settle over him. Finally, I said, you want money from me. A long pause. Then a gritted, yes. It was everything I had been waiting for. All those years they ignored me, dismissed me, treated me like an afterthought, and now, they were begging me for help. I could have done it. Could have bailed them out, played the bigger person. But then I thought about 15-year-old me, working after school just to save for a future they never cared about. 16-year-old me, walking everywhere because they refused to teach me how to drive. 17-year-old me, opening that acceptance letter alone, with no one to celebrate with. So I made my choice. You know, I said, my voice calm, for years, I would have done anything for you. Anything. I would have bent over backward just to get an ounce of your approval. Silence. But now, I let out a breath. I don't need you. And the best part, you need me. My dad started to say something, but I cut him off. I spent my whole life being invisible to you, I said, voice steady. Now, you're invisible to me. And with that, I hung up. I wish I could say that was the end of it. That I never heard from them again, and I walked away completely unbothered. But people like them, they don't give up easily. They were desperate. But this time, I'm ready for them. I thought they would give up after that last call. That once I made it clear I wasn't their safety net, they'd finally leave me alone. I underestimated them. Because when manipulation doesn't work, when guilt trips don't break you, when begging isn't enough, people like them find a new way. And this time, they weren't just coming for my money. They were coming for my name. It started with a phone call from a journalist. At first, I thought it was about work, maybe an industry piece or something about my career. But the moment I picked up, I knew something was off. Naomi, I'm writing a feature about family struggles and how successful children sometimes abandon their parents. I was hoping to get a comment from you. I froze. Abandon their parents. My chest tightened, but I forced my voice to stay steady. I'm sorry, what? He hesitated, then said, your parents reached out to us. They shared some concerns. I closed my eyes. Of course they did. It didn't take long to find the article. It had all the makings of a pity piece, a tragic sob story about aging parents who sacrificed everything for their children, only to be cruelly abandoned. My father, once a respected businessman, was now struggling to make ends meet. My mother, a devoted homemaker, was heartbroken over the loss of her daughter. And Brianna, she was the grieving sister, watching helplessly as I, her own flesh and blood, turned my back on our family. They painted me as the cold, selfish daughter who had everything and gave nothing back. And people ate it up. The internet was divided. Some people saw through the act. Others called me ungrateful, heartless, a terrible daughter. I shouldn't have cared. But after years of being ignored, of being invisible, now, suddenly, the world was watching. And I had a choice to make. For a week, I said nothing. I let them enjoy their little victim narrative. Let them think they had won. Then, I called Brianna. She picked up instantly, like she had been waiting. Naomi, she said, voice dripping with fake concern. I was hoping you'd call. I almost laughed. She was so predictable. So, I said, getting straight to the point, how much? She paused. What? I leaned back in my chair, my voice calm. How much do you want? Let's cut the act. You and I both know this article isn't about family values. It's about money. She exhaled sharply, like I had ruined her script. Then, she tried again. Mom and Dad are in a really bad place, Naomi. They just want to fix things. They don't want to fix anything, I interrupted. They want control. And if they can't have that, they'll settle for ruining my name. Another pause. Then, softer, they're our parents. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. Yeah, and for the first time in my life, I don't owe them anything. That night, I did what I should have done years ago. I sat down and wrote my side of the story. I didn't fight them in the press, I didn't need to. I just told the truth. Every forgotten birthday, every dismissal, every time they made me feel like I was nothing. I didn't write it for revenge. I wrote it so they could never rewrite history again. And when it went public, their story fell apart. People saw them for what they were, manipulators, users, people who only cared when it was convenient. And suddenly, they weren't the victims anymore. A few weeks later, my phone buzzed. It was my dad. I stared at the screen, then slowly picked up. He didn't sound angry. He sounded tired. You win, he said. I exhaled. It was never about winning. A long silence stretched between us. Then, quietly, he said, I don't know what you want me to say. I thought about that for a long moment. Then, I finally told him the truth. Nothing. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't need anything from him. Not his love. Not his attention. Not his validation. Nothing. And that was the real victory. You'd think after everything, after they lost control of the narrative and got exposed for the frauds they were, that they'd finally give up. That they'd take the L and disappear from my life forever. But no, because people like them don't know when to stop. And if there was one thing I had learned, it was that when entitled people lose their grip on you, they don't let go gracefully. They make it ugly. A month after the article dropped, I got a text from an unknown number. At first, I thought it was another random internet troll, one of those people who still thought I was the villain in my own story. But when I opened it, my stomach tightened. We need to talk. It's urgent. I knew that tone. That fake, vague urgency meant to lure me in. I should have ignored it. But instead, I typed back. Who is this? 3 dots appeared. Then, Mom. I almost deleted the message right then. But a part of me, the part that still had those old wounds, the part that spent years hoping she'd wake up and actually care, froze. I sighed. Then, I typed. What do you want? It took her exactly 1 minute to respond. Can we meet? Please. It's important. I hesitated. My first instinct was to say hell no. But then I thought, no. I wasn't scared of her anymore. I wasn't that desperate little girl trying to earn a place at the table. So I took a breath, and I replied. Fine. We met at a quiet little cafe in the city. It was public, neutral, somewhere she couldn't cause a scene. When I walked in, she was already there, sitting at a corner booth with a cup of coffee she probably wasn't even drinking. She looked different, older, not in a graceful aging kind of way, but in a life finally caught up to you kind of way. She looked up and saw me. Her face softened. Naomi, she said, like my name still meant something to her. I sat down across from her, leaning back in my chair. All right, I'm here. What's so important? She sighed, like this was just so hard for her. Then, she pulled out a thick envelope. I frowned. What is that? She slid it across the table. Your father and I are struggling. I laughed before I could stop myself. Wow, shocking. Her lips pressed together. We wouldn't be here if we had any other choice. I stared at the envelope. Then at her. What's in it? I asked, even though I already had a pretty good guess. She inhaled sharply, then admitted. The house is in foreclosure. Ah, there it was. The last card they had left to play. The house. I repeated, pretending to think. You mean the one I was never welcome in? The one I had to leave at 18 with nothing? She flinched. It's still our family home. Is it? I tilted my head. Because it never felt like mine. She exhaled, clearly annoyed now. The fake motherly act was slipping. Naomi, I'm not here to argue. We need money. A lot of it. If we don't come up with it soon, we'll lose everything. I raised an eyebrow, and her eyes flickered with something, disbelief, maybe even offense. Like she truly didn't think I'd say no. And, she said, forcing a breath, you have the ability to help us. I looked at her for a long time. And then, finally, I leaned forward and asked. Why would I? Her mouth opened, then closed. I kept going. Seriously, give me one good reason. After everything, after years of being treated like I was nothing. You ignored me my entire life, but now, suddenly, I'm supposed to swoop in and save you. I let out a sharp breath, shaking my head. You know what's funny? You never thought I'd amount to anything. You never saw me as someone worth investing in. But now that I've made something of myself, now that I actually have something you need, suddenly, I matter. Her face twisted. That's not true. Oh, but it is. I leaned back, crossing my arms. You never cared about me, Mom. You only cared about what I could give you. She went quiet. And for the first time in my life, I saw it. The truth. She wasn't here because she suddenly saw my worth. She was here because she had no other options. I picked up the envelope. Weighed it in my hand. Then, slowly, I pushed it back across the table. I'm not giving you a cent, I said, my voice steady. Not now, not ever. Her jaw clenched. Naomi, no. I stood up. We're done. You made your choice years ago. Now I'm making mine. She stared at me, something ugly flickering behind her eyes. You'll regret this, she snapped. I smiled. Actually smiled. No, Mom, I said, voice calm. I think for the first time in my life, I won't. And with that, I walked out. That was the last time I ever spoke to my mother. A few months later, the house went into foreclosure. They lost it. Brianna moved states, my father disappeared into obscurity, and my mother. She tried reaching out a few more times. But I never responded. Because I was finally free. And the best part, I didn't need their approval. I never did. For years, I fought for them to see me. To acknowledge me. But now, I didn't care if they saw me or not. Because the people who actually mattered. They already did. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an amazing story.